Good morning. Welcome to the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture here from Northeast Arkansas. I'm Lee Riley. I'm an Extension Water Quality Program Associate for the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture and Arkansas Discovery Farms program. We're happy that you've joined us today for our 8th virtual field trip in the Soil and Water Conservation Series, funded by USDA's Natural Resource and Conservation Service, hosted by the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture. Today, we will be visiting Mike Wood's Arkansas Discovery Farm in Cherry Valley. We'll learn about conservation practices being conducted on his farm, specifically his irrigation management and surge valves. One of the great benefits about being able to participate live virtual field trips is that you can submit questions at any time in the Q&A box, and we'll answer as many questions as we can at the end of this presentation. So be sure to hit that Q&A box with any questions you might have. Up first, we're going to hear from our Arkansas Discovery farmer, Mike Wood. He's going to give us a little history about his farm and conservation practices and how he got involved with the Arkansas Discovery Farm program. Mr. Wood.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here with y'all this morning to talk about conservation and particularly the surge valve for the use of irrigation on soybeans and the information that we've gathered from it from using it for the last several years through the Discovery Farm program. So I'll give you a brief history of my farm. I graduated from the University of Arkansas in 1972 and came home to farm. At that time, my dad farmed here in Cherry Valley, and he had a farm at Hunter, Arkansas, and I got the opportunity to go down there and farm for about 5 years until 1977, and my father got ill, and I moved back up here to help him, and he passed away in '79, and I was at the age of 29. You know, there was a lot of stuff that I needed to know about farming that I wasn't able to gather from him in the short time that I was farming with him. So I leaned heavily on the Extension Service for a lot of information about different things, and was always happy to offer my farm for any demonstrations that they wanted to do, and made all the meetings I could to try to learn everything I could about farming. And I guess the first time that I was really struck by water conservation was in the mid-'70s. I went to a meeting in Augusta where the Geological Survey put on a program about groundwater, about the alluvial aquifer and the Sparta aquifer. And at that time, they were mentioning it during this meeting that we would, in all likelihood, lose about a foot of water a year because our aquifer is in an area similar to Stuttgart where we do not get a recharge of the aquifer like they do on the east side of Curley's Ridge or over on the Cache River. So our aquifer would, like I said, diminish about a foot a year. And it's been about almost 50 years since that meeting. And at that time, in the 70s, our water level was around 50 or 60 feet. And now it's 100 to 110 feet to water. So it has proved to be true what they said in that meeting. So that's what kind of sparked my interest in water conservation. And so back during the early 90s, I installed a relift pump here on the Langill River, which runs along the east side of my farm, and had it tied into some underground pipe that I had on the farm already to utilize the surface water rather than having to pump groundwater. So that was the first project that I got involved in. Then later on, I was working with an engineer from the Extension Service, Phil Tacker, and Phil wanted me to help him do a demonstration on water quality. We picked out a field here on the river, and he was monitoring the water coming out of the well as well as the water running out of the field to compare the quality of those two samples. And he found at the end of the year, of course, back then they didn't have the technology they have today, so he'd have to come out and take a sample himself of the discharge water as well as the runoff water. And after that year of collecting data, he found that the water that was running out of the bottom of the field was actually higher quality water than what was coming out of the ground. Apparently the rice in the field had filtered out a lot of the impurities that were coming out of the discharge out of the groundwater. So that was very interesting to me. And so in the meantime, I was planting trees on some of the ground that I couldn't irrigate. I was putting in grass filter strips along the edge of the river where the river would back out and flood my crops, and wasn't really getting any profit from that ground. So we planted grass filter strips around the edge of the fields. And after seeing what it did in the rice field, and I thought the grass would, they said it would be great to do that. So I did that. I put in a tailwater recovery project on one farm where the majority of the farm would drain into a ditch. I'd put a relift at the bottom of that ditch and pumped it back into the top of the field where the canal was to utilize, that water. And then, I think 2010, Mike Daniels approached me about participating in the Discovery Farm program. And he explained to me that they were trying to gather true data about the runoff into the Langell River, because there were some parties that were claiming that the farmers were destroying the Gulf of Mexico with all the nitrates and whatever that was running into the river. So he wanted to gather some information, some true data to show whether it was or not. And so I thought that would be great. So I've been participating with him on that since 2010, and it's been very enlightening, and they've gotten quite a bit of data from that. So then in 2012, because the Langell River watershed was determined to be a critical groundwater area, the NRCS came up with a program, a cost share program, where they would pay 75% of the cost of a reservoir. So I jumped on that real quick, and we put in a 30-acre reservoir up here on the river on ground that it was very unproductive to start with. So, and we tied that into an underground pipe system that I already had in place with 3 other wells tied together. So that has proven to be a great program for me. I mean, it's a great investment. We actually have one well that we had to abandon because it ran out of water, and we haven't replaced it because of the reservoir. So I would like to mention about our surge valve. It's been a very productive instrument in irrigation of our soybeans. We have a 100-acre field here that we take half of the field, and we'll irrigate it, of course, with polypipe, and doing it the traditional way of just running the water down the rows. The other half of the field, we've installed a surge valve, which entails 2 different runs of polypipe that are connected with the surge valve. And the surge valve will alternate between the 2 runs. It will put the water out on one run for about 2.5 hours. Then it'll stop and switch to the other run for 2.5 hours or so. And then back and forth, usually for about a 24-hour period or whatever it needs to reach the bottom of the field. In our case, I think it's 24 to 36 hours. And what we have found in this project is that our soil moisture sensors, we have one on each field. The one on the traditional polypipe irrigation, they have levels of 12 inches, 18 inches, 24, and 30. And on the traditional polypipe field, we were just reaching the 12-inch level. But on the surge valve side, we were dipping down into the 24-inch. So you saw that there was a lot better infiltration on the surge valve side than on the other. So what that ended up doing was eliminating at least one irrigation throughout the season. Depending on how dry the season is, I think on average you could eliminate at least one irrigation, and in a real dry year, possibly two. So it is a tremendous cost-saving piece of technology. In closing, I would just like to thank the NRCS for the programs that they have initiated, and I've been a part of the EQIP program. Like I mentioned, they helped me on the reservoir. They've actually helped me with pipes, that underground pipe and drainage pipes over the years through the not only the EQIP program, but the cross-county conservation district programs. So they've been a great help to me, and I really appreciate it very much. Again, thank you for allowing me to be here, and I hope it's been of some help.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. And Mr. Wood will be available at the end of the program to answer any questions. So if you're watching on Zoom, be sure to take advantage of that Q&A box. If you're watching on social media, we have people monitoring that as well, and we'll be able to answer any questions that you might have. So be sure and get your questions to us. Up next, we have University of Arkansas Division of Agriculture irrigation instructor Mike Hamilton, who's going to give us a little more detail about how a surge valve works and go over some other irrigation water management practices related to surge valve technology. Mike?
Hello, I'm Mike Hamilton, and I'm going to talk to you about some irrigation water management tools that can help you on your farm. One of the first things that we like to talk about is computerized hose selection. And what we're using for that is a program called Pipe Planner that was developed by Delta Plastics. What Pipe Planner does is it measures the amount of water that we have for each furrow, not just for the field. It takes into account the elevation and the length of each furrow and gives us a hole size that we will punch so that we can get the correct amount of water in each furrow so that all of our furrows or rows will water out evenly. It also gives us an estimated time that it will need to apply, let's say 3 acre inches. For a 1,500 gallon a minute well on a 40 acre field, it should take about 36 hours. And the program gives you this estimate. And that's all it is an estimate to know how much water you're putting on a field, which is very important for the next thing I'm going to talk about, which is called a surge valve. You can also use furrow.uaex.edu, the new calculator that we made to measure that amount of water you have and the field size, so you can kind of guesstimate quickly how much water you have on a field and time required to get the correct amount on it. What is a surge valve? Basically, a surge valve is a T that diverts water from one set to another with a battery operated valve in the center that swaps from one side of the T to the other side of the T. Now, instead of the one 36-hour set that we just talked about with Pipe Planner, now it breaks it into two sets, and it's going to be two 18-hour sets. The function of this IWM tool is that it helps get the correct amount of water on a field. It does this in two different ways, the advanced cycle and the soak cycle. So how does the advanced cycle work? And how do we know if we even need the advanced cycle? Well, this is past experience on a field. If our experience on the field is that in 36 hours we've been pumping and we're not only through the field, we're only about halfway down the furrow, down the row, then we know that we're not getting 3 acre inches on the field. We're probably getting 6 or 7 acre inches because we're pumping twice as much water on it as we need. We're getting very deep percolation in that scenario. And even if this water is down there in storage for the plants for later, we're not worried about later. We're worried about right now. We don't have the wells scattered around the farm that we have the capability that we can pump that long on a field. Plus, you can't pump for 70 hours on the field and it be healthy. We're worried about crop health. We want to get that water on and off as quickly as possible. Well, how the advanced cycle works on a surge valve is we set the surge to that 36-hour advance, the full time that it will take for it to get out, or should take. And then we turn it on and it alternates from side to side. Each time it flips from side to side, it will send a pulse of water down it. And when it goes to the other side, that will kind of seal over. And when it comes back, that water should shoot down that quite a bit faster and hopefully penetrate down to the bottom of that row or that furrow so that we can actually get 3 inches on and get the water across it faster without getting so much deep percolation down in the profile. So how does this soak cycle work? And how do you know if you need the soak cycle? Well, this is a past experience issue again. If we know that we have water running out the bottom of the field in only 18 hours, and it's supposed to take us 36, then we know we only put 1.5 inches on that field. If 36 hours, we're supposed to put 3 inches on, and in 18 hours, half that time, we put 1.5 inches on. So we know we're not getting the correct amount of water on the field. Well, how this works, the soak cycle, is we'll set that advance to half of the target, which is 18 hours. The two together is 36, so half of that would be 18 hours. And it will run the advance cycle for 18 hours. Water should be at the bottom of all the furrows. And then the program, the surge valve, will automatically switch to the soak cycle. And then it will alternate water back and forth and send a short pulse, smaller pulse, that should go down that wetted surface much faster from the top to the bottom of that row. And then this is the soak cycle. So it's just soaking back and forth. It's soaking down in the profile for the remainder of the 36 hours, for 18 more hours, so that we get a good soak on the field. And that's called the soak cycle. Now, we do have to babysit this the first time or two we do it. You can't just assume that it's going to be 18 hours. It may be 16. It may be 22. You've got to really know from past experience and how much water we have out there when we're irrigating. It may change how fast it runs across it on our timing, coming back. So we've got to watch it the first time or two, but once you get it set, you'll get it set right to where we're getting the right amount of water on that field. And every field is different. So I would highly encourage our growers to use soil moisture sensors so that we can measure that depth that we're getting the water down in the profile. I like to use 6, 12, 18, and 30-inch sensors so that I can tell how deep I'm getting water down into my soil profile. There is a big difference in irrigating and watering, folks. And please don't hesitate to give us a holler if you need some help. For more information on surge valves or any other IWM practices, please contact your local county extension office or your NRCS office.
Thank you very much, Mike. Remember, Mike will be able to answer any questions you have at the end of the presentation, so be sure to get those to us in the Q&A box on Zoom, or if you're watching on social media, enter your questions there. Up next, we've got Arkansas Discovery Farms co-director, Dr. Mike Daniels, who's going to give us a little more information about what kind of research we're doing on the wood farm and what kind of data we've collected and results we've managed to gather so far. Mike?
Thanks, Lee. My name is Mike Daniels, and I'm a specialist with the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture with the Cooperative Extension Service. I work on soil and water conservation issues, and I co-lead the Arkansas Discovery Farm program with Dr. Andrew Sharpley. And today we want to share some results from the Mike and Derek Wood Farm in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, and specifically those results related to different aspects of irrigation. There's a lot of questions when you go to irrigate your crop that you have to answer. And those questions are, is how much do I irrigate? When do I irrigate? How often do I irrigate? And what's the best way to apply that water to the field? And so we've looked at some of these different things to see the effect on how much runoff volume we get and also the quality of that runoff water. And so we want to share some of that. One of the first things we did is we wanted to look at how we are scheduling irrigation. Are we irrigating too often? We've always used a computer program that the University of Arkansas Division of Ag developed many, many years ago. And it's a computerized system that estimates evapotranspiration, or water loss from the crop through evaporation and transpiration. And then that was put into a model. Weather data could be collected by farmers, put into that model on the computer, and then it would let you know when to irrigate. Well, Chris Henry came along, a new irrigation specialist several years ago to our state, and brought the concepts of using these ET gauges, or evapotranspiration gauges, like you see on the right. They're called atmometers, but they really simulate and give us an idea of how much evapotranspiration that we might have. The advantages we thought we had over this is you didn't have to collect weather data and put into a computerized program. You could go out and physically read the meter or the atmometer and get an idea of what your daily thing is. And then you could set a soil deficit on the meter, and that would allow you then to know when it was time to irrigate. Now, part of our work is that we want to measure every drop of water coming onto a field and every drop leaving. And so we take great lengths to put on irrigation flow meters and make sure they're working properly to measure how much water is going on. And then in this bottom left corner, you see a pipe, and you can see our lines from our instruments running back into the pipe. That allows us to measure the flow of water out of this pipe during runoff, and then we can calculate how much runoff we got from an event. This is just a closer look at the atmometer. These are the little rings where you set your deficit on your soils, and we have guidelines for how you set that and what you need to set it at for different growth stages of the crop and what crop and that sort of thing. But you can see there's a water column in this, and you can see it's dropped just a little bit below the upper limit, and as it drops and gets down to this lower red band, they're adjustable, then that tells you when it's time to irrigate. And so you can set your deficit at different levels, and once you get down there, then you just reset this and check it again. So this way it's easier to just drive by a field, look at it, and you know you've got a good idea of how much water's been used by that crop up to this point, or during that time of period between your two rings there. And so we wanted to, but before we start using a new technique, we always want to compare it to what we would at one time considered the standard, and that was the computerized irrigation scheduler. And so we set up in the field, we had water flow, and we divided the field in half. In this half, we watered by the ET gauge. So every time the ET gauge told us to irrigate, we had it where we could irrigate this side separately from this side. And this side was the Arkansas Irrigation Scheduler. And so we had this, and Rick Wimberly, our county agent, has run the scheduler many, many times. He collected the weather information and ran the scheduler for us. And he also went out and measured the ET gauges to know when to irrigate. Now, at these 4 locations that you see these words here, or these labels, we wanted to also see what effect the irrigation had the soil had on the irrigation. How far down was the water moving? Where were our crops, our soybean crop, using that water? So we put 4 banks of soil moisture meters in the ground at 6, 12, 18, and 30 inches deep. That's what we recommend, is that you put a bank in, because roots can get down in different situations, different soils to different levels. And this gives us a better idea of what the soil profile is doing in that case. And so these have become more and more popular, but they use electrical resistance down in the soil to measure and correlate to a water content, or a water pressure really, that we can take and make interpretations on where the soil moisture is in our soil profile. Now, what we did is we had that field divided up just about evenly. We had the Arkansas Irrigation Scheduler, like I said, in the one half, and we had the ET gauge in the other half. Our crop was soybean, and what we found is that within a day of each other, it was calling for irrigation. So we got 7 irrigations in both times, and we were careful to try to water the same amount. We put approximately 18 inches on during those 7 irrigations. That's a little over 2 inches each time we irrigated. And so really, virtually, we found out that the ET gauge performed very well compared to our irrigation scheduler. Even though it's a different technique, it gave us the same results. And that gave us confidence that the ET gauge was something that would be useful if farmers chose to use it. So there was virtually no difference in the method. So we feel good that the ET gauge is giving us accurate readings, and ones that are useful to us in helping schedule irrigation. And if you want to look at what the soil water did, these blue lines that are vertical, these are when we had the irrigation. And I want to thank Chris Henry. He made these graphs for us several years ago as part of his involvement in the Discovery Farm program. But that represents, and as these lines move up on the y-axis, the drier the soil is. And so as these lines move up, and we can see when we irrigate, many times they move back down, and you would hope that they would move back down to close to 0. 0 represents saturated soil conditions, and certainly they do at the soil surface. You can see they get a little bit closer, a little bit of delay at 12 inches. But what we notice is that for all 4 areas in the field, we were seeing the same type of pattern. The movement up along with ET, the dotted line is evapotranspiration. So you can see with the predicted ET, these soil moisture meters kind of mimic that same pattern. You know, obviously they didn't all give the same number, because there is variability in soil properties out there, but they all follow the same pattern. They all came down to around 0 at 6 inches. We see the same thing at 12 inches, this wetting and drying cycle, but that gets dampened out at 18 inches. We see some of them, but others are not, water is not getting down there. And then certainly when you go to 30 inches, we're not seeing the wetting and drying cycles at all spots. So we're not getting water as deep in the soil profiles in some parts of the field as others. And so soil moisture can tell you a lot about when you need to irrigate. And we use that as just one of the triggers now to determine when to best irrigate. Well, the other thing we had is, based on that data that we saw on the soil moistures, we realized at the bottom of the field, we weren't getting as much water into the soil. I'm sorry, at the top of the field, it was going down, and we were getting a little bit more in the bottom of the field. And so we felt like we needed to do something to help get that water down there and not lose as much tailwater during these irrigations. So one thing that we thought we could do is that we could take put a surge valve in. And a surge valve is basically an automated control of a butterfly valve that will switch a flap to one side or the other. You can program it based on the time that you want to run it. And that's, you know, you've got to play around with these when you first use them and get them set to where they give the optimum procedure, because every field, every soil is different. But we divided the field in half. We had a control, we had a treatment. Our control was just simply using polypipe with pipe planter. Our treatment was using polypipe, and then further taking that half of the field, dividing it in half, and using the surge valve to put all the well capacity on one part of that field, and then switching to the other part and having a resting period. And the idea is that when you allow it to rest, more water soaks in, and then when you come back after resting, that soil's wet, water will move quicker across that wet soil, and will move quicker down the field, and then it allows you to get more water uniformly down that furrow. And so we measure irrigation flow on both sides of the field. So you can see that this red area was the pipe planter without the surge valve. And so we just had one strand of poly pipe, no surge valve on it. And we used the entire well capacity on that. And then you can see over here, we split the field in half. So these are about half the size of the without the surge valve. And you can see the surge valve here, we have two lines. We have a line here that is used to do this part of the field. And then we have a line that's a supply line until you get to the other part of the field. And then we punch holes in it and let water out. And then down at the bottom, we have our collection devices that allow us to collect for water quality samples as well as runoff volume. And this is kind of what it looked like up front. Here's your surge valve. Here's one line running off to do this part of the field. Here's the other line that runs off and does not have holes punched in it until you get to the far end or that half of the field. And then here's the other line running to irrigate the other end of the field. And this allowed us to measure the amount of water going on to each treatment separately. Now, what did we find? Well, for some reason, we put out a little bit more water. We put out 18 inches with the surge side, and we only put out 17 inches with the no surge side. And you know, we do this work on real farms, and real farms, sometimes you can't always control how things happen, but certainly what happened is we put a little more water on the surge side. We were getting ready to irrigate the non-surge side. We got some rain, so we turned the irrigation off, and that's why you have less water. But it doesn't matter because we can put it in a relative term, and we can look at the tailwater loss. And this is measured with our automated water samplers that you can plug in, and a device that will allow you to measure the volume of runoff. And you can see we lost about 8 inches, or 7.5 inches anyway, to tailwater loss. And down here with the surge, we cut the tailwater loss almost in half. And so the surge job did a good job of reducing the amount of tailwater loss. Now, if you want to look at an efficiency, you can take the total irrigation, or in this case, 17 inches, and you can minus the tailwater loss, and that will give you the effective irrigation. And then you can divide that by the irrigation amount, or 17, and that tells you the efficiency or the percentage of water that actually made it into the ground. And we can see, even though we can see with this data that we got a lot more water in the ground and a much higher efficiency with the surge than we did the no surge. And so we felt really good that we could save water with a surge valve on this particular field. Will a surge valve save water on every field? It depends. It depends on what you have with the field. It depends. You know, I think the first step in putting some soil moisture sensors out there and seeing what your water distribution looks like across the field and down the field with the rows. And if you see some things that you're not getting water where you want, then maybe you can use a surge valve to correct that. And for more information on surge valves, you can certainly contact Chris Henry, our irrigation engineer, or any of our county agents, and they can give you more information on this. But really what we ended up with was much more effective irrigation with the surge as far as holding water on. Well, what does that mean? If you're losing less runoff water, does that mean you're losing less nutrients? Well, the first thing I can say, and we've got nitrate nitrogen, which is soluble, which will move with water. We've got total nitrogen. We've got the soluble P and the total P. Then we have the total solids. First thing I will say, these are average values across all the runoff events for irrigation that we had. I think we had 5 or 6 irrigation events during this time. And so these are average numbers. And these are very low numbers. If you look at this is pounds per acre. We're not losing much in terms of pounds per acre from either side. But in fact, with the surge, we did reduce the amount of nutrients being lost, primarily by reducing the amount of runoff. So if we were losing a lot of nutrients, this would really show up and be really effective at helping us reduce nutrient losses to our waterways. But in this case, we're not losing much either way because this is is well managed. We match up the fertilizer needs with soil testing very well. And these long, flat rows, really irrigation, when you do furrow irrigation, you're dripping water at the top. You're just not gaining a lot of energy to take those nutrients and move them downstream. So we have that working in our favor on these farms with the long rows, is we're not losing a lot of nutrients anywhere that we look at around the state during irrigation. If you want more information about the Arkansas Discovery Farms, here's our website, discoveryfarms.uark.edu. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Look us up. We're constantly putting feeds and new information and things up on those feeds. So with that, I thank you. And please, we'll be more than happy to help you with anything that we've done with Discovery Farms.
Thank you, Dr. Daniels. And we're about to get into our question and answer portion. So if you've got any questions you'd like any of our panelists to answer, go ahead and get those into the Q&A box, or if you're watching on social media, get those entered and we'll get them answered. You'll have, if you're watching on Zoom, you'll have some poll questions that pop up we'd like you to answer briefly. And without any further ado, I'll get into our first question. Mr. Mike Wood, I'm going to direct this question to you. First off, what other practices have you used through the Discovery Farm program? I think they mean conservation practices have you used through the Discovery Farm program? Or for that matter, any of the NRCS programs?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What was that question again?
What other conservation practices have you used besides the surge valve?
Oh, over the years, we've used the grass filter strips, the tailwater recovery. We have a tailwater recovery project going. Of course, the reservoirs, as we mentioned earlier. But my son takes care of most of the irrigation now, and he's worked closely with Mike Daniels. Mike Hamilton and Mike Daniels, but thanks the world of Mr. Hamilton. He's helped him a lot, and over the years we fine-tuned it real well. So he's doing a great job on that. But that's primarily what we've done.
Okay. All right, this next question I'm going to direct towards Mike Hamilton. What type of cost savings does adding a surge valve typically?
Thank you. I don't know if I can get my head in the screen after Mr. Wood's comment there, but I do appreciate that, Mr. Wood. But what cost savings are we seeing with the surge valve? I've seen some fields where we've saved 50% of our irrigation cost on that irrigation cycle by using a surge valve. You know, we were getting such deep percolation out in the field where they were pumping hours and hours and hours, much more than we recommend pumping, and getting too deep a percolation out there and putting on 6 and 7 acre inches at a time. And, you know, with the surge valve, you know, we're able to put on what we need in an irrigation set. So we're saving significant amount of money with them in the right scenario.
Great, thanks. I think we got this next question came in maybe before Dr. Daniels' presentation, but he could maybe touch on this a little more. With the surge irrigation, are you noticing an increase in fertilizer runoff, or is it actually decreasing? Is it affecting the overall fertilizer application, meaning too much in one area, too little in another due to surge?
No, what we're finding is that on average, just about across the board, and maybe even a little bit higher on total suspended solids, which we use as a indicator of sediment loss, that we're actually reducing the amount of nutrients by 50%. And like I said, that's a little bit higher for the sediment loss. So the surge valve is actually helping us get water down the row and getting it into the soil and not having as much runoff. And so it's just not picking up the nutrients and carrying them if they are there. The one nice thing we have going for us in eastern Arkansas is we tend to furrow irrigate or trickle water slowly down our flat furrows for long distances. And in that manner, we don't have very much nutrients available or the energy of that water to move sediment and that. So we see a big difference when we get a rainfall as compared to irrigation. But under irrigation, especially furrow irrigation, we see a reduction with surge, but we don't see very much loss in furrow irrigation at all.
Thanks, Mike. We still have time to get some more questions in, so don't hesitate to hit that Q&A box or send us questions on social media. This next one I'm going to send back to you, Mr. Wood. Have you guys been impacted by the Langell River flooding over the past few years? I know that I've seen news articles about the Langell flooding just about the past 3 or 4 springs.
We have avoided any major flooding this year, but this has been about the first year in several that we haven't had quite a bit of rainfall. There's times when we'll have a total of probably 6 inches plus over a 2 or 3 day period, and when we do that, that river will back out on a good mile or better away from the river. And I've got fields within that area that sometimes it takes almost 2 weeks for that water to get off. So, you know, we do lose a lot of crop every year as a result of that flooding. But yeah, we sure wish we could get something done to help the duration of flood decrease on the Langell, but haven't been as successful in doing that.
Mike Hamilton, what's the number of acres a surge valve can handle?
Well, there's really not a number of acres that we can limit it to, or that we can keep it under. It's got more to do with the time requirements. You know, we don't like pumping over 40 hours with a surge valve. We like to be at 36 or less. 24 or less is even better. But you really want to do it by the hours that we're pumping on the field, so we have, you know, that crop health that I was talking about earlier. You know, we really want to get that water on and off a field, and there's not a set acres that's under that. It's all got to do with how much water you have and how efficient we can get that on in a timely manner. Now, we can take that surge. You know, we had one in Crittenden County years ago. We got to it, and we come back to look at the field and walked over there, and the surge valve was gone. And, you know, we're just about to have a heart attack, because this, you know, they're $2,500 to $3,500 for a surge valve, and it wasn't sitting there. And the grower started laughing. He said, yeah, he said, I used that on 3 or 4 other fields. He said, I didn't think y'all would mind. And, you know, as long as he was happy with it, we was happy with it. But it sure did have us draw it up there for about 30 minutes.
Mr. Wood, I know the answer to this question, but some of the audience would like to know if you have a wildlife enterprise, duck leases or anything on your farm. I know you have access to a lot of water as close to the Langell as you are.
Oh yeah, I've worked with DU on a lot of projects. They've provided me with some underground pipe over the years and closing up rice fields. But yes, I've got a group out of Memphis that's been with me almost 30 years duck hunting, and got a group from Chattanooga that come in and have a lease, and then several people from Kentucky that come in every year to duck hunt. So yes, it's fun. I enjoy helping these fellas kill as many ducks as possible, and I've enjoyed it over the years, and it actually has put most of my 4 children through college.
That's great. Mike Hamilton, tell us where the best location in a field to locate your soil moisture sensors are.
When we place soil moisture sensors in the field, you know, of course, the wettest part of the field is not where we want to be, which is up by the poly pipe or down at the bottom where we might have some tailwater running and possibly back up. So we typically like to put them in the driest part of the field, which is generally about halfway down the furrow from the poly pipe down to about 2/3 of the way down the furrow. But we also want to look at soil type and put it in the most predominant soil type that we have in the field, but also the most limiting soil type that we have in the field. You know, that way we can trigger an irrigation, you know, based on science instead of, you know, just a seat of the pants decision.
This next question can probably be for Mike Hamilton, or I'm sorry, Mike Wood and Mike Daniels. Could you guys talk to us a little bit about the Mrbi project with the Langell River Coalition? I know Mr. Wood mentioned that he was had some special funding available from NRCS due to his location. Either of you want to address that?
I just am so appreciative of the program that NRCS provided for that reservoir. That was a great investment for me, and for them to pay 75% of that was great. I'm not sure if are we still in that critical groundwater area. I'm sure we are, but I think the programs have changed somewhat, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, the program that you refer to, the MRBI, is the Mississippi Healthy River Basin Initiative, which is a USDA NRCS initiative, not tied to the Farm Bill, but it's called a landscape initiative. And the way the MRBI works is there's money set aside for 13 states for farmers to put conservation practices in to help reduce runoff to the Gulf of Mexico and then nutrients to the Gulf of Mexico. NRCS administers this program through EQIP, so it doesn't have to have a different program, but the money comes from a separate fund, a different set of funds from EQIP. And what it does is the Langell Coalition, which Mike was a part of, and other farmers, they worked with their local conservation district to write a proposal, an MRBI proposal, which got funded. And in that proposal area, which included several 12-digit watersheds or HUCs within the Langell River, they obtained funding for certain practices. So it was a way of getting the conservation districts and farmers to help plan and propose what they were going to do. And it's been very successful because it's increased the amount of dollars that are available to do things like put in a reservoir or underground pipeline or land leveling or cover crops. There's and if you want to know more about it, the best thing to do is visit your local USDA service center, and NRCS and FSA can tell you all about the programs they have that help us get soil and water conservation practices on the ground.
Great, thanks. Mike Hamilton, I'm going to pitch this one towards you. It's a short question, but I'm not sure it has a short answer. Should surge valves be used on all fields?
I'm going to say no. I don't think any of our IWM practices, with the exception of computerized hole selection, possibly, is a one-size-fits-all answer. You know, I don't think if we're getting good infiltration in the field, and if we use pipe planner or our furrow irrigation calculator, and with our 1,500 gallon a minute well on a 40-acre field, and it's telling us it should take 36 hours to irrigate that field, and if we're doing it in 36, then we're getting good infiltration, and there's no need to get more infiltration, and you know, you really don't need one there. So it's not in every scenario. But it is pretty significant on how many acres that we can see a benefit. You know, it's like a cover crop. You know, sometimes a cover crop is going to help us get more infiltration out in the field, and certainly a surge valve will do the same. And then in some scenarios where we're getting super good infiltration already, where we don't need a cover crop because it's hard. We've got fields. I've got some fields in Lake City that I can't hardly get water to the bottom of the field, even with a surge valve. You know, God just didn't mean for water to go down those sandy furrows. If we didn't get a big rain out there, we would never get water to the bottom of those fields in about 30 or 40 rows out there. So, you know, there's definitely a place for this practice and that practice, but I don't think it's a one size fits all. And just to add to the question before, you know, all of these IWM tools, you can get assistance at your NRCS office for a lot of these. There's a lot of cost incentive payments for using these tools in your fields. So don't hesitate to hit up your NRCS office for some assistance out there.
Great, thanks, Mike. I guess I'll pitch this to you, Mike Hamilton, while I've got you talking, but any of you can talk from experience. Maybe the question is, could surge valves increase yields? And I guess I would like to know, have you seen yields increase by the use of surge valves?
Yes, we've got some fields up in Greene County that we had the producer knew that he wasn't getting any infiltration whatsoever on the field. You know, he would irrigate it, and he said in 6 hours water was running out the bottom of the field. He could walk out there and scratch the surface, and you know, only get down an inch or two down in there where water was getting down in. He would irrigate Monday and Thursday, and we incorporated a surge valve, and yes, we see the yield increase. We also see the decrease in his pumping costs because, you know, he was actually able to spread that out. Instead of irrigating twice a week, he was actually able to irrigate, you know, once every 7 to 10 days, depending on the weather. So he could stretch that out to where he could actually catch a rainfall event from time to time. So, you know, there's definitely some yield advantages to getting the correct amount of water on the field.
Great, thanks. Don't forget, if you haven't already done the poll on Zoom to answer those poll questions. We've got time for just a few more questions before we'll have to wrap this up. Let's see here. Mr. Wood, have you used a surge valve anywhere else on your farm?
No. The cost is a little prohibitive. You know, it is around $2,500, $2,700. I have applied and been approved for through some two equip programs on 2 different fields to get surge valves and soil sensors, and so hopefully in the next year or two I'll have a couple of more.
Okay, thanks. Mike Hamilton, you probably will need to explain what this is to some of our audience, but this question is, can a surge valve work with a variable frequency drive or VFD pump? Could it make the irrigation even more efficient if you used it in conjunction with a VFD?
VFD's variable frequency drive is used to on an electric motor to speed it up or slow it down. And yes, there's definitely a benefit of VFDs, and like I said, there's a benefit to the surge valve. But and yes, together you can see a cumulative benefit from using those devices. But once we set our irrigation design on a field, we're not going to use that VFD to go up or down with the flow, because we want to remain constant so our efficiency stays high. So you know, we're not going to change how much water we're putting on the field once we're irrigating, but there's definitely an advantage to both devices. Yes.
All right, I don't have any more questions. Do any of our speakers have anything else they'd like to address before we wrap things up?
Lee, I'd like to take an opportunity to thank Mike Wood and Derek Wood for hosting us and being a cooperator and being our discovery farmer in Cross County. They have just been tremendous to work with, have done everything and gone beyond what we've asked. And I just want to publicly thank him for the many field days and other efforts that he has done to use farmer-led education with other farmers and policymakers and things about what we're finding on his farm. So thank you, Mike Wood.
I'll echo that. Working with Mr. Wood and Derek has been great. Really appreciate them letting us do the research on their farm that we have been. Did have one last question show up here. I'm going to pitch this back to you, Mike Hamilton. Do you know off the top of your head how many acres in the Delta are using some kind of irrigation water management practice?
Oh man, that's a great, not enough. Let me put it that way, not enough. You know, I know that we're very significant on our acres that we're using in computerized hole selection. I've got people that are doing it that can't run a computer, but they're doing computerized hole selection. And I know one guy over in Harrisburg that says, why in the world would I want to learn how to do that when I can get Hamilton to do it for me? So we have 10 IWM specialists now with the NRCS scattered all throughout the Delta. And, you know, there's help for guys everywhere. So there's not enough, but the percentage is growing. We're doing great work. And our growers like Mr. Wood and our other growers that are letting us work with us to prove these practices are phenomenal.
Great. Mr. Wood, did you want to say something before we wrapped up?
I just want to thank the University of Arkansas for their work and helping us with all this technology and helping us produce better crops. The NRCS for funding all of these projects as well. It's been a pleasure working with each and every one of you fellows, and just keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, everyone, we want to thank you for joining today. Our virtual tour of Mr. Wood's farm in Cherry Valley in Northeast Arkansas. This soil and water conservation virtual field trip and live Q&A. We appreciate and want to thank NRCS for funding this series, and the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture and all the people that have worked behind the scenes for making this a possibility. We hope that you've enjoyed getting to learn about our research and the benefits of surge irrigation. To find out more about soil and water conservation and our upcoming virtual field trips in the series, please visit uaex.edu. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you for joining us for the Soil and Water Conservation Virtual Field Trip. This broadcast is funded by NRCS and produced by the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture Cooperative Extension Service. To find out more about soil and water conservation, visit uaex.edu.